Welcome to Issues and Answers with Diane Kinderwater. Issues and Answers is presented as a public service to inform, educate, and better the lives of New Mexicans. And now, Issues and Answers with your host, Diane Kinderwater.
Welcome to the program. I'm Diane Kinderwater. We know we're inside of election time. We know the election is November 4th. They're saying, well, there's not a president running. No, it's not a presidential election. There's not a governor running. No. But many municipal cities across New Mexico are having elections, and those elections affect your life. So again, it's important to vote. Here at KCHF TV, Issues and Answers, they're very gracious to allow us to invite the mayoral candidates for Albuquerque. Those who have accepted our invitation are our guests. And I'm very pleased to have with me today Darren White. He's going to be our guest, and he is one who is running for mayor, and he's accepted our invitation. You may know Darren. He was a former Bernalillo County Sheriff. He was a Department of Public Safety Cabinet Secretary under Governor Gary Johnson. He was part of the Army 82nd Airborne Division. And we're going to talk about his experience and why Darren White is running for mayor. And again, that election date is Tuesday, November 4th, just around the corner. We'll be back with Darren White right after this. Stay with us. You perhaps see some campaign signs around the roads. Perhaps you've heard some radio commercials or even TV commercials, but there is an election. It's an important election. It's not for governor. It's not for president, but it is for mayor. Mayor here in Albuquerque and many cities across New Mexico are having municipal elections for city council and mayor. And you're saying, well, that's not such a big time. Well, it is a big time because you pay taxes, and those taxes affect your lives, how they're being spent. Are those taxes being spent on what you want them to be spent on? Or are you thinking maybe you're paying too many taxes, too many fees? Well, we're going to hear from Darren White, who's running for mayor. And thank you so much for throwing your hat in the ring and for accepting our invitation to be a guest on Issues and Answers.
It's really good to see you. It's been a while. You and I worked together. It was in the mid-'90s, but I like to tell people we were only 10 years old back then. So, yeah, it's 30 years already.
And you've been a guest on Issues and Answers a number of times, as when you were the cabinet secretary for Governor Gary Johnson, and of course you were the Bernalillo County Sheriff as well.
Yeah, no, it's, boy, you look back sometimes and you go, just where's it go, right? I mean, how could that be 30 years ago, and here we are. And Diane, I think that segue into that is we're kind of dealing with some of the same issues as we were 30 years ago. Especially as it relates to the city of Albuquerque. Let me tell you why I did, I was kind of at a point in my life where I was happy. I wasn't fully retired. I was working at KKOB. I was the program manager for the station. But, where I started to think about it 2 years ago, my son and I have a company that we do demining work around the world. And demining is just what it is. We take landmines out of the ground that have been left behind in wars. And so we got invited to Ukraine 2 years ago. The war had been going on for a year. And we were with advisors. And our whole purpose of our trip was to discuss with the local people in these local communities about what it takes to put together demining teams. Ukraine is now one of the most polluted countries in the world for landmines. And while I was there, I was 15 miles from the Russian border, and I could hear the shelling going back and forth. I was close enough to hear that. I was never scared. I was never nervous. It makes your eyebrows raise a little bit. But I came back from that visit, and I went to go visit with a friend of mine, who's also a business partner of mine. And on my way down Central, there was a car parked in front of me on the street. And it looked like they were talking to people because there were people right alongside of the car.
On Central Avenue,
on Central,
right here
in front of the Four Hills movie theater. Gun comes out the window and shots are fired, and a young man was shot in the chest. And, do what you would do, right? I jump out of the car, call 911, administer first aid to the young man. Luckily, he survived. It went through and through. But it made me angry that I just came from a war zone, a literal war zone, and I couldn't even drive to see a friend without witnessing someone almost get killed. Sad part of that story is I said he lived, but the sad part was he didn't even know who they were. or what they were arguing about. They were arguing with other people. And so he was just a guy waiting for the buzz. And
Oh, come on. I was thinking there was a drug deal going
Nope.
down right on
Nope.
Central, which you hear about all the time. An innocent bystander was shot.
And he just
in
kept
the
saying, you know, please have God pray for
Oh,
me.
Darren.
Please have God pray for me, because he thought he was going to
Darren.
die. His eyes were rolling back in his head. But for those of us who have been in the military and in law enforcement, I felt like he had a good chance because that bullet went right through him, which indicated that it probably didn't hit the vital organs. And so he did survive, but it made me angry that this is what Albuquerque has become. You know, we've become overrun with crime. You know, our families live in fear. Businesses struggle to survive in this environment, and we need change. Mayor Keller has been an abject failure when it comes to protecting our citizens.
When were you Bernalillo County Sheriff?
From 2003 to 2009.
Oh, okay. Wasn't that long ago, really.
Yeah, no, it's 20 years ago.
Okay, 20 years ago. Where were you born and raised?
In New York.
In New York, but you've been in New Mexico,
Yeah.
what, 40, 50?
Almost 40 years.
40 years.
Yep, I came.
And
I
I've
was,
been here about 40 years.
Yeah, I was in Houston at the time. I was a police officer in Houston, and my ex-wife, my son's mom, she wanted to come home. She didn't want to raise our son and you can imagine, in Houston. And so I
came back to lovely New Mexico
and joined the police
40
department.
years ago.
And became a police officer here.
And how it has changed.
It has.
How it has changed. And you said we're afraid. I mean, people are afraid to go out at night, afraid of our neighborhoods.
So
I know people in my neighborhood moved houses because they thought we don't want the homeless. We're too close to the street. I mean, it's incredible how it's affecting our lives. And not
Every
only
day.
you, but I have friends who won't shop in that part of town where you mentioned that the shooting was. They live there, but they said,
Yeah.
I wouldn't go to the grocery store there.
It's
They won't
scary.
go- It's scary. It's,
You know, Diane, one of the things I say, when I started as a patrolman, I worked that part of town. And oddly enough, it was called the war zone, even back then. It's just a nickname that it got because it had its issues.
well, that's Central, Zuni,
Yes, it had some-
Louisiana.
Louisiana, yes.
Now the
basically San Mateo to Eubank.
Oh, even back then it was the war zone.
Yeah,
And
and
they
so-
tried to change it to the international district, but it's back to the war zone.
Yeah, that actually
Yeah.
was the mayor when he was a state senator. He lived in that area, but he no longer lives in that area. He moved out. But no, it had its issues, it had its problems, but nothing like we see today. When you drive through that section of Albuquerque, you know, you think, like, there are times it looks like the apocalypse. You know, the homeless have set up tent encampments everywhere. They have fires going, especially when it gets cool out.
I have friends who have businesses where a medical business, the homeless, they burnt the business.
Yep.
And that meant the physicians no longer receive a salary and the patients no longer receive the medical care they need.
Yeah.
I mean, this is happening under our nose in our neighborhoods.
You know, and there's families that have lived in those neighborhoods for generations, and they're great folks. And I can't even imagine what it's like to live in that environment because it's almost like you couldn't have enough safety.
But it's not just there. It's not just the war zone.
It's not.
We're naming every. Sometimes I
No.
say when I drive down Montgomery and Carlisle, I say I duck my head because that's where a lot of shootings are. When I drive down there,
Yeah.
come to the studio,
Yes.
I duck my head.
2 days ago, I was walking. I walked down the tramway bike path, and I have encountered homeless wrapped up in sleeping bags that I thought were dead. You know, and me being the person that I am, I have to check them to make sure they're okay. And most of the time, they're just on fentanyl. But 2 days ago, as I was walking, I almost stepped on a needle. And it would, when I say step, I have, of course, shoes on, but there's no place immune in our city because
No
the mayor has just let them do what they want.
So you were wanting to visit a friend, and you saw a shooting, helped
Yes.
with aid. Then you decided to what? Run for mayor at that point, Darren White?
No. I was angry. And so about a year ago, I started to think about, all right, we got to find somebody to run. The election is right.
You gotta find somebody.
And I talked to people. I asked them, and I'm not going to kiss and tell who it was, but several of them were businessmen and were just like, nah, it's not me. I don't want to do it. Some elected officials were like, nah, I just don't want to do it. I actually had one person said, why would I want that job? He's like, as bad as that problem is, It may take a decade to fix it. I don't believe that's true, but I also respected what they were saying. Well, then the first of the year came up and there was nobody running. Nobody had physically announced that they were running for an election that was 11 months away.
That's very unusual. Usually we're 2 years out, 3 years out, even, okay.
And that's when I started to give it serious consideration. Like, okay, we need to have somebody run. And Diane, I don't approach this from like I'm a be-all, end-all person. Like, oh my God, they're so lucky I'm running. I just felt like with my experience, crime and homelessness are the number one issue in our city. Every poll that's done, those are the two issues that rank at the top. And it's something that I'm used to dealing with.
And you actually filled out a poll. I have it right here in my hand, the 2025 ABQ Mayoral Candidate Questionnaire. Which is very detailed if people want to go online.
I like to give people facts when I talk about what I'm going to do. There have been almost 800 murders in our city since Mayor Keller has been elected. 800.
Sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, fathers, mothers.
Yeah.
These are not just statistics.
Yeah.
They're actually our neighbors.
Yes. And, my grandfather was murdered. And so I know what that did to my father being a 10-year-old boy when that happened. Until the day he died, he lived with that pain. And so we have all of these families out there who've been directly affected by that. But also when you look at that number, you have to go back from the point that Mayor Keller was elected. You have to go back almost 16 years to accumulate that many homicides. Mayor Keller likes to talk about, we're seeing the first declines in 10 years. And I like to remind him that in 2014, we had 30 murders. And in 2024, we had 106.
106.
That's not a decrease in crime.
Why is it happening? What's going on out there? And what would you change if you're elected Mayor Darren
There
White?
was a drastic shift in the way we do policing. The mayor kind of went with this hands-off approach, and especially with the homeless. We saw that kind of early on in his administration with Coronado Park, and we all know how bad that became. Hands-off. They started to transition into this, okay, we're not going to take a bunch of calls for service. We're not going to do traffic stops. I ask people all the time, when was the last time you saw a police officer do a traffic stop? Well, that's how we do proactive policing. When I was on, we were trained that if you're doing traffic stop, a traffic stop is good because you're reminding somebody that you've got to obey by our laws. You can't just drive through town at 100 miles an hour.
The 50 cars passing the traffic stop see
but
that.
But there's also a very important aspect of that, and it's proactive policing. When you're talking to that person, they're saying to you, I don't have a driver's license. Okay, why? That immediately sends off a signal to a cop. And you look in the car, and you see things in the car that don't make sense. And when you ask questions, their answers don't make sense. And that causes a police officer to dig a little bit deeper. That person may have a warrant. That's why they don't have their driver's license. They may be burglars that are just leaving the area of committing a burglary. And the mayor literally says, he said this the other night, and it floored me. He said, we are going to invest in technology and civilians to fight crime. And it was shocking to me because he's been doing this for 8 years, and he knows that you have to have police officers out there on the front line every single day doing what they get paid to do. And if you let them, they'll do it because, look, they're invested in our community. That's why they became officers. They don't want to be restrained. Like I said, they don't want to be bridled. They want to be out there to be able to do the job.
Are we down in the number of officers we should be having?
It's a nationwide crisis, the recruiting. The mayor, it's hard to get a straight number, but let's just say there's 880 officers.
But we should have about 1,200
Probably
maybe?
so, yeah.
Something like that. So recruiting them would be difficult. Would be a challenge. But getting more on the street, that's what you would
Working smarter. Getting more, the chief's executive staff has been bloated to almost 50 people, where it was always 15, 16. And so let's reorganize the department. Let's get every officer available out on the streets, taking calls for service, protecting our communities. And that's going to have the greatest impact.
And your effect regarding ICE coming in here, the immigration, naturalizations. What's your position on Albuquerque being a sanctuary city? I'm not sure if it's really officially defined that, but the idea that people who are here, illegally or haven't followed the rules to come here? What would you do with them, and how would you help the government, federal government, wanting to get rid of people who have committed crimes here, who aren't supposed to be here?
And Diane, make no mistake, it is a sanctuary city. Under the current policy, we're shielding people who are committing crimes in our community that are also in our country illegally. It's a very simple fix. We haven't, you hear them say we're an immigrant-friendly city. Well, every city should be immigrant-friendly because, well, we're all immigrants to some degree. There's one segment of our population that can say we're not, but most of us are. And so what we need to do is allow ICE to come in and provide them with the data, our arrest record information. Let them do the job. We have too much work to do on our own, but I also will say to you, we have too many criminals already on our own. We don't need to be shielding people who are in this country illegally, who are committing crimes. We'll turn the arrest data over and let them decide who they need to look at further. And actually the way that it works, Diane, it's pretty simple. ICE will come in and they will look at everybody. They'll look at the name. And if they see somebody that they think may be in this country illegally, they will check their records in their database. If they determine that the person is here illegally, all they do is they put a detainer. It's a hold on that person. You'll hear the mayor say, well, if they commit a crime here, they should be sentenced here. Well, of course they should be. Let them be sentenced, let them be adjudicated, but once they do that, they need to be deported to the country they came from.
Simple as that. Anything else you'd like to point out regarding crime? We only have 10 minutes left, but there's a lot of other issues that we
But that's
want to
the
touch
issue, right? You know, I believe that as the mayor or as any public official, our fundamental role is to keep people
us
safe.
Okay, let's move on to the state fair, which is a big thing coming up now. I mean, it's the state fair, but it's right in the heart of Albuquerque, and there's discussions that they want to make that perhaps a homeless housing, low-income housing development, or something else.
Yeah.
What's your position as mayor?
They had the meeting yesterday evening, and there were a lot of people upset. I guess the real issue, Diane, is they need to notify the public what they intend to do, because for many people, they believe that it's already been decided. This will amount to the largest public works project in the history of our state. It will drastically alter the footprint of our city. I think we need a little bit more information other than, oh, we've got a plan. And so it's hard to sit here and tell you what their plan is when we don't know what it is. But I think they do, and that's the issue. And, shame on us for being skeptical of the government. And so it's my hope, and, I've been very outspoken about it. I love the state fair. I want us to save the state fair. I'm very concerned you're going to take a beautiful piece of real estate. You're going to make it into low-income housing, and it's only going to make the problem worse. And so I want a hell of a lot more information, but right now I'm on the side of save the state fair.
Save the state fair. What are people telling you on the election trail, Darren White? What are they?
Crime, homelessness. I hear from a lot of business people, Diane. Had a wonderful conversation with a man down at First and I-40. Owns a little lawnmower repair shop. Couple of blocks north. There's a large tent city down there, several hundred people. And they move them back. I call it homeless whack-a-mole. That's their policy. They move them to one side of the street, and then they come back the next day.
What did the man say? The business
He said,
owner
look,
say?
I walked in and introduced myself. And I asked him, I said, how do you survive? And he told me that barely. And he explained to me that a little while back, he had some lawnmowers that he repairs. He keeps them out on his curb and he sells them. Mm-hmm. And he saw one of the homeless guys walking away with one of the lawnmowers. And he went outside there and confronted him. He said, I grabbed it and I pulled on it. We kind of had a tug of war. And he goes, and the guy punched me a couple of times, but I got it away. And he said, when I got back to my little business, I walked inside and I put my hand where he hit me. He goes, because it really hurt. And then he goes, then that's when I realized that he stabbed him. He said, I was stabbed 3 times. Now, you would think that that man who has told that story to our mayor and to our governor And you would think after hearing that story, they would go in and clean that up. And they haven't touched it. And he still struggles to survive. There's businesses much like him. You know, 2/3 of all jobs in our city, 2/3, small businesses. We need to start treating them better. They'll have a partner with me.
Partner in terms of other businesses seem like they were penalized for calling for help, that they weren't doing enough to protect their businesses. When they would call for the police, it seemed like the city was penalizing them.
First and foremost, the tent cities come down on day one. They come down. We will offer them the services that the city, you know, $300 million they think that they've invested so far. $300 million and nothing to show for it when it comes to the
There's
homeless.
really like no accountability. There's a lot of nonprofit groups out there, Darren, that are helping, that they're being paid, they're giving a percentage of our sales tax, are going to drug prevention and all these programs, but I don't see any accountability in anything.
And how can you say with a straight face to the public? We think the mayor, his new tagline is, Albuquerque is making a comeback. From what? I mean, nobody believes that, especially if you look at the condition. There are parts of our city that are unrecognizable anymore. And, you know, they come down on day one.
Especially that Louisiana and Central. Those they were two former, I think, I drove by there the other day, state office buildings. I think, I don't know, 14 stories high. They're big office buildings.
Yeah, well, the mayor did a press conference there a few weeks ago, and a day later they found out that there was a dead body inside of one of the buildings. You know,
anyway,
day one. It's as I said.
Day one.
I got a plan for it.
What are your plans? I'll stop talking and let you tell us what your plans are.
So we go in and we shut it down. We offer them the services that are being provided. If they refuse to accept the services, they will be told one time, you need to leave. If they don't, they'll be arrested because you have to enforce the law. The law currently says you cannot sleep on our streets, on our sidewalks, and in our parks. The mayor has allowed the police department to ignore that law, and I will enforce it on day one. Then we'll come back behind it with a plan called ABQ Clean. And if we can spend $300 million on these programs for very little, then we can spend $20 to $25 million on a program where we hire people with their only one job and one job only. You keep our streets spick and span. And I really think that we can turn it around. You know, next year's a 100-year celebration of Route 66.
Oh,
we're not ready for the party, Diane. We're not ready for the party.
We don't want people seeing what we see.
We will be. We will be. And you know, I speak passionately about this because I am passionate about it. This is the city that I've spent most of my life, and I love our city, but I don't like what it's become, and we need to turn it around before it's too late.
What would number 2, 3, and 4 be on your list?
So the other part is the economic development aspect of it. We have businesses that are struggling. You know, it takes too long to get through the permitting process. I propose that we privatize some of that so that we can help. I'm not saying it needs to be taken over by private businesses, but we need to help in that first review process. I want to see a renewed commitment to our roads because the mayor spent all of our money in other projects. Our roads are crumbling. And the other thing I want to look at, I want another bridge. It's about time the hardworking people that spend hours of their life in traffic, it's time that we recognize it and we start the development of a new bridge. Don't know where. I will let everybody get together to decide it, but there will be a big push for another bridge. Somebody told me Espanola has more bridges than Albuquerque. How can that be?
It's tough getting, you know, all the jobs on the east side. It's horrible.
Yes.
It's horrible getting across. It's a waste of time, and the environmentalists, all the gas has waste, electricity if they're driving a car. I mean, a lot of waste of time, people's time and energy.
And finally, get control of the budget. It's increased over 60%. It is now.
But our population has too, hasn't it?
Yes, our population has increased.
But not,
but what I was saying, it's like, but not to the degree of $1.5 billion. And very little to show for
our
it.
population, actually, the state of New Mexico and Albuquerque isn't increasing over the past 10, 20 years. It's not, but our budgets are increasing.
Oh, yeah,
so we're not getting any more services for the money, but a lot of money and fees are increasing. Everything has. So
and who's picking up the tab?
I am.
We are. Yeah. And then, you know, and their answer to everything is we can tax our way out of this. people are going to, Diane, people are going to give up. They're going to say, why? Why would I want to raise my family? So many of the officers that I know, many of them, they just say the hell with it. It's not worth it. And so, as I said, we're at a tipping point in our city, a tipping point. We either change the direction where we're going, or I'm afraid we may not be able to recover from it.
And people are telling you that on the streets.
Oh,
on
every
the campaign
day.
trail.
Every
We know
day.
that. I mean, there's parts of the city that I hesitate driving by where I used to enjoy going by, and now I don't, for fear of the danger of it.
Yes.
And I can't imagine the poor businesses who have invested their livelihoods on being in those parts of the town can't make
Absolutely.
a living. And that denies us of the service. If I want my lawnmower repaired, I won't be able to go
No.
because he won't be there any longer.
I want to also start a juvenile crimes unit. I'm old enough where, on the old TV shows, it was called the Juvie unit. But we, in all seriousness, we have a significant problem with juvenile crime. And I want to get some officers who are trained specifically to deal with the emergence and the trends that are taking place in juvenile crime.
They're not just becoming criminals, but as robbing them of a life. To kids themselves, it's not fair to them.
The laws were designed for kids that pack lunches, not guns, and we need to change them.
Anything else in your final
No,
points,
it's great to
Darren, that
visit
you'd like
with
to
you.
tell folks about your campaign, where they can find more information?
Absolutely. DarrenWhiteForMayor.com, DarrenWhiteForMayor.com.
That's pretty simple.
Yeah.
Again, businessman, former sheriff for the Bernalillo County, veteran, and much more. Father and grandfather.
Yes.
That's a lot.
Grandfather.
That's plenty. Thank you so much for being part of this program today, and as you had in the past, Darren White. Thanks again.
Thank you, Diane.
Nice to see you. And thank you for watching this program. And thanks to KCHF TV for introducing you to the candidates who are running for mayor of Albuquerque. It's an important election. Make sure your voice counts and vote. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Issues and Answers with your host Diane Kinderwater is presented as a public service to inform, educate, and better the lives of New Mexicans. To comment on today's program, email us at info@kchftv.org or call us at 505-345-1991. Join us again for Issues and Answers with Diane Kinderwater.